You're listening to the Synergy Leadership Podcast, a discussion with engaging, empowering, and enlightening leaders about the greatest competitive advantage in business and entrepreneurship that often goes unrecognized: a team's energy. Here's your host, the woman who puts the energy in synergy, Karen R. Jenkins.
Welcome to this episode of Synergy Leadership. I am so honored to have a long-time friend, colleague, mentor, you name it, he's it, Scott Bellows, joining us for this episode today. And Scott is a plethora of information. He's a walking encyclopedia. And I wanted to bring him to this audience so that he can share some of his information and resources with our audience. So without belaboring this, Scott, can you come in and introduce yourself and give us a little bit of your background, where you're from, how you got started, and where you are now?
Okay, like you, there's a long history, so I'll try not to spend too much time on it. I think of a little town called Marshall, Minnesota as home. I have not been back there for probably 40 years, so it's been a while. My late father helped to found a small college there. It's now a small university. And I guess I was like a lot of people, high school student. When I was 16, I did become a foreign exchange student for a year abroad. Actually went to South Africa. This is back in the days of apartheid. So it was an eye-opener for me to, I felt like I was going back in our own history, from what I knew of it. I came back and realized that there was a gap between myself and a lot of the people that I went to high school with, because you grow up a lot when you're on your own overseas. From there, I went to Monmouth College in New Jersey, applied there 3 weeks before school started. I should have applied for schools like most people a year in advance or something, and but I had been overseas and came back and had very little time, and went there primarily because they had a good diving program. I was a springboard diver, and graduated from there, went on to Columbia University in New York, which was fairly close, did a degree in international affairs. After I graduated, I joined an engineering firm in New York City that at that time was the 6th largest engineering firm in the country, mainly because they had one massive project in Pakistan. They ended up sending me to Cairo, where I still have a lot of fond memories, and I'm actually doing some work in Cairo right now. And spent 4.5 years there, met my wife, who's from Kentucky originally, over there. We got married. And then I headed off and did a degree at USC, one in Los Angeles. And graduated from there, decided that the rat race of Los Angeles was not for me, and drove cross country. We bought a little house up in the mountains of North Carolina. Spent about, maybe 8 months just kind of looking for jobs, doing part-time work. And then I ended up joining USAID, which I know you're familiar with, the Agency for International Development. Spent, I think it was around 12 years with them. My first overseas assignment was in Mogadishu, Somalia. And I think you know how that story turned out. I got one of the last commercial flights out of there, and then the country kind of fell apart right after that. Not because of me, but it did. It just did. The person that I reported to when I went to Somalia was at that time in Nicaragua, and he and I worked very well together. And so I talked to him. He said, "Well, come down here. I need a deputy." And so I ended up in Nicaragua for 4.5 years. And from Nicaragua, went and spent a year in Jamaica. And then I went to Miami, where I opened up a foreign trade office for USAID. And at that point, they were talking about me going overseas. I'd spent, after Somalia, 8 years in single status overseas and decided it was time to do something else. So I resigned from the Foreign Service. I came back to Columbia, South Carolina, where my wife was. She's an only child and her parents lived there. So that's where I was going to go. Came back there and went into a partnership on a computer company for about a year, decided that that was not what I should be doing. And while I was trying to figure that out, I said, well, I'll just take a part-time job with this organization called the SBDC. They were looking for somebody that had a background in contracting, which I was a warranted contracting officer with USAID. And I joined them thinking it was going to be a stepping stone while I figured things out. And that was 15, 16 years ago, something like that. So I work with them part-time, 3 days a week. And then I have my own company that I play with the other days of the week. How's that for a quick summary?
That is awesome. And world traveler, the multitude of experiences that you have. And I'll share with the audience, I met Scott, I think back in 2012. And I had started my company in 2008, initially to work with the nonprofit in Charleston that was fighting foreclosure throughout the state as a result of all of the financial crisis that we had. And I did work with them. I created the company to be a service provider for them, and eventually went from doing just counseling to doing some consulting work for them and some consulting work for some other nonprofits and other agencies. But the work was slow and I needed to rebrand. So I started working with SBDC and was introduced to Scott. And we've been together ever since. And one of the things that amazes me about you, Scott, is that during my time, as a small business owner, you don't know what you don't know. And through my connections with you and meetings with you, as I came across a need or a need for information, most time you would expect if you're working with one consultant that's working with you on one project or one category, that person would say, oh, well, let me refer you to Bob, or let me refer you to Mary, because they have expertise in that. And I must say, I don't think there's anything that I've ever had an issue with that you weren't able to help me walk through. That the depth of your knowledge and the depth of your understanding of small business just always seemed to amaze me. It never ceases to amaze me, I should say. And one of the things I want our audience to know is that there is a plethora of information out there and resources available. And one of them is the SBDC. And I think we talked a little bit earlier about some services that the SBDC offers, but tell us a little bit about the Small Business Development Center and what does it offer?
Okay. First of all, the SBDC is part of a national organization, the ASBDC, Association of Small Business Development Centers. They're throughout the United States. In South Carolina, we are typical of SBDCs elsewhere. Sometimes some of them are branded as SBTDC, Small Business Technology Development Center, like in North Carolina. They're funded primarily, well, when I say primarily, maybe 50% more or less by the Small Business Administration, which is an arm of the federal government. A lot of times people will say, well, Scott's with the SBA, and that's not quite true. We're funded, but it's a completely different organization. And as the name implies, Small Business Development Center, the emphasis is on small business. As you probably know, Karen, the definition of a small business by the SBA is quite different than what a lot of people would think. I think if you're in construction, for instance, I think it's gone up to a little over $39 million a year, averaged over a 3-year period. And below that, you're still a small business. So most of my clients, however, are anywhere from a one-person operation to maybe 20, 30 people, somewhere there. I mean, they're what I think of as small businesses. Most of the clients got into whatever business they do because honestly, they were pretty good at the particular thing they did, whether it was something, if they were an accountant, maybe they said, well, I'm going to open an accounting shop. If they were in construction and they were really good at masonry work or cement or something, then they would open up their shop. And as I have no doubt you have learned the hard way, running a business is a challenge. And you know, there are in government contracting, there are set aside programs, and quite often there's a waiting period. If you're doing 8A or one of those, there's quite often a 2-year, you have to have been in business for 2 years. And they do that because they say in those 2 years, you're going to learn the hard way. You're going to learn a lot. And so we being the SBDC offer services really across the board. I mean, there's, I think, 17 offices. I think there's in excess of 50 people that are staffing those offices. And of course, with COVID, that all became virtual, you know, so which is nice. We just had a strategic planning meeting this week. And, you know, pre-COVID, everybody, they were in their little silos, you know, in the cities. And this has allowed us to work better together as an organization. And so it's very typical for me to get a call from one of my colleagues, and my own area of expertise has to do with government contracting. And they'll say, Scott, I've got a client that needs this. And we just have a meeting, just like we're meeting right now, a Zoom meeting. And I will take them through the part that my colleagues aren't as well versed in. And then they go back and continue doing things, whether it's a business plan or looking for financing or something like that. So it really covers almost anything that a small business is going to run into. And like I said, I've been doing this for about 15 years. And, you know, after a while, there's kind of a common denominator. I know you do some work, roundtables with small businesses, and I'm sure you hear the same things coming up again and again and again. And, you know, hopefully after all those years, I've learned one or two things and I can be helpful.
Well, I can attest to the fact that, yes, you are very helpful. And one of the things that I think people don't realize is that the SBDC offers the service at no cost to the client. And there are businesses out there are consultants out there that tout, hey, I can help you with this, I can help you get certified in this. You know, I know when I first started looking at government contracting, one of the requirements is that you have to register on SAM. And it's sam.gov. And as soon as your name hits that roster, I'm not sure how these people do it. Maybe they do a query. It is public information. I started getting these phone calls, primarily from the Greenville area, but you know, we could help you get on the GSA schedule. We can help you get your 8A for $3,500 or $5,000. And the challenge is, again, as a small business, you don't know what you don't know. You just said it, and we speak this all the time, that we have a trade, we have a gift, and we open up a business, but that is only about 35% of the business. The other 65% is how do you run this thing? You know, how do you keep up with your financials? How do you market this thing? What is your sales strategy? Licensing, all the other requirements that you have, keeping up with your taxes, paying your taxes. There's so many other pieces to this puzzle that you need support. But as a small business, your cash flow is also tight. So why not leverage some of the SBA-backed, SBA-supported resources that are available to us, which is the Small Business Development Center. One thing I think you guys have access to is market research. You know, when you do a business plan, you also have a template. I know you guys used to have a template. When I was teaching at Allen, I actually used your template for my students when I was teaching a business class. And that was one of their projects, was using the template that the SBDC provided to come up with their practice small business. And then part of that template asks for market research, but you guys have access to market research that you provide your clients. There's so many other things that you, even from a point of QuickBooks, right? I want my audience to understand that I was, doing something and had a question about QuickBooks, and Scott knows about QuickBooks. Like, he knows about everything. There's just not much that, like I said,
well, part of it is I have run a small business, and you learn,
which makes it even better, because the fact that you have been in the seat where we are just adds more value, and you can kind of speak our speakease, right? You can speak with our language and understand our struggles. So I'm sure that over the 15, 16 years that you've worked at the SBDC, and you probably worked with thousands of small businesses, share with the audience some of, maybe 2 or 3 of the common denominators that you have seen businesses struggle with, that maybe they didn't need to struggle with it because there was a resource out there that they didn't know that it was there, or just maybe they struggle with it and you guys help them through it. What are some of the common things that you have seen?
Ironically, one of the first things that I do is I talk to a business owner about what business they're in, and you'd be surprised how many people really don't know what business they're in. That sounds silly. If you're in construction, they say, and they want to be prime contractors, and they want to manage subcontractors. They want to be one of the big boys, if you will. And you say, so you're really a management firm. You're not, because de facto, that's what they end up doing. A lot of my clients have come out of a background where they were really good at what they did. And they might have worked for a state agency or something like that. And then they try to do the same thing in the private sector that they were doing with the state agency. And I can still remember talking to one client, and her first year on her own, she did okay. And then it got a little worse and a little worse. And she just was beside herself. She didn't know why she wasn't succeeding, because she was really good at what she did. And I asked her, I said, well, when you were with the state agency, did you subcontract out this work? And she said, oh, no, we would never do that. And all of a sudden it dawned on her that she was trying to do what she knew how to do, but it was in contracting lingo, they would say it's inherently governmental. It's something you don't subcontract out. And I said, well, then we have to find something else that you can do, that draws on your background. But people can't do it. If you ask a person, say, tell me about your business, and they can't articulate it. And of course, networking is invaluable, in getting work and getting referrals and that sort of thing. And, you've been at the same things I have, where they'll say, well, why doesn't everybody stand up and just say who you are and what you do and go around the room? And half the people can't really say what it is that they do. And so I think that's at least where I begin usually. I find one of the areas that I'm going to say 9 out of every 10 businesses have a problem with is accounting. Accounting is not something that you typically take in high school, and a lot of people, they may go beyond high school. But even if they do, a lot of people don't take accounting, and so all of a sudden you're trying to do it. And as you know, there's a ton of reporting, especially if you get into the government contracting side, where you have to have a balance sheet and a profit and loss statement, and you have to see what's going on. And they don't have that background. And of course, the advice that people are often given is, well, you need to get yourself an accountant. And an accountant I haven't priced them recently, but I'm saying anywhere from $40 to $70 an hour. Well, a small business can't afford that. And so in the end, when I hear them say, I've got an accountant, what they're really saying is, I take all sorts of receipts and papers and things at the end of the year to my accountant, and he somehow gets out my 1040. He does my annual tax returns, but they don't really have an accounting system. And so that's another area. I think that a lot of business owners don't fully understand the business systems, the processes that you go through. I mean, it sounds very simple, but from a quotation to a sales order, and doing the work, you might need to do things like project management, Gantt charts and all that good stuff in between. And then the invoicing. And as simple as it sounds, a lot of the clients, when I meet them, they are literally going in, they're eyeballing a project and they're saying, okay, I think $5,000. It's just pulled out of the air because they really don't know what it costs them to run their own business, because they know that they have to make enough money to pay the internet bill, the insurance on the car, ink for the printer, all those things. And so that's what's driving them. But those are all business expenses. An accountant would call them indirect expenses. It's the overhead, the G&A, the fringe benefits, those things. And if you don't really have a handle on those things, where you can consider that in your pricing, you're really just guessing. And that's a good way to find yourself, like a lot of my clients, where they work hard, they're the year. And that's where they have to learn to think differently. And that's one of the things that I try to do, is to teach them to think a little bit differently.
And all great points, all great points. And one thing, back to the you don't know what you don't know, and leveraging a resource like the Small Business Development Center, I think is crucial, because there's, again, when you talk about small businesses, especially the ones that are just starting out, there is no cost associated with, connecting with a consultant to get that service. But going back to the accounting part, and even then, when people get CPAs, or you have an accountant that you can work with, having an accountant and understanding your numbers is two totally different things. Mm-hmm. And you don't want to find yourself in a position where you just hide, like you said, you put all this stuff in a shoebox and you give it to the accountant and they go off and miraculously do some things. And a lot of times that's mainly for tax purposes, but understanding your day-to-day operation, you need to understand what the P&L is, what the profit and loss statement is, what does it tell you when you're monitoring it on a monthly basis, you're looking at your balance sheet, you understand what that's telling you. And one even more critical than that is your cash flow, because cash flow puts successful businesses out of business. I've seen successful businesses that have had staff on hand and they grew so fast that they had to wait for clients to pay them, but their payrolls were still due. They didn't have a line of credit set up, so they ran out of cash before the end of the month, and it was a problem. It was a huge problem.
When COVID hit, that hit a lot of companies.
Because
yes, now definitely. Everybody was saying, I want paid today, and,
yes.
And all those accounts payable were due immediately, and a lot of companies had a really hard time.
So you have to understand that. The other thing around the knowing and understanding the numbers, and you hit on it, was people, guessing out the sky, pie in the sky, and that this is how much I'll charge you to do this service. The reality is you need to know how much it's going to cost you first. Mm-hmm. Because I've seen clients that have gone out or small businesses that have gone out and priced something and it was lower than what it was going to cost them to do it, which means they're basically paying the client to provide a service. You'll be out of business this week.
It happens more often than you can imagine.
Yes. So you have to be able to calculate, what is your break-even point? Break-even means if I do this service, I have to cover all of these expenses. This is what it actually costs me to do the job. And I have to have all of these covered. But it's not just about a break-even, because who's in business to break even? I'm in business to make a profit. So you have to understand your numbers. And if you're looking for resources, as I said before, that can help you understand and get started before you go out and talk to these official service providers, you can come in and talk to the SBDC consultants in your particular state, because they're everywhere. Again, sponsored by the SBA. This is a national company, a national program that I personally believe in. At one point, I was carrying Scott's business cards with me. And as I met other small businesses that needed support, I would say, hey, you need to call Scott. Then I just had to start saying, call the SBDC because I needed to be able to get into Scott too.
We end up putting in some long days,
We did. And I used to tell people, one of my challenges as I got into business for myself was, it's lonely being in business for yourself when you're the business owner, because when I was in corporate America, I had a boss that I was accountable to. So if I had a challenge or I needed something, I could go to them and they would give me guidance. I had teammates that I could go and talk to that were my peers, that we shared some of the same challenges. So when you come over and you're the boss, right? When you're the owner and you have staff, I can't use my staff as a sounding board, because when I say things, they don't understand, hey, I'm venting or I'm doing a sounding board. They think that that's the direction we're going in. So every other day, if I'm, doing the sounding board thing, I'm confusing them.
Back up.
Yeah. Like, wait a minute. Yesterday, Karen, you said we're good. But no, I was just, using this as a sounding board. But Scott has served as that sounding board for me. I've always wanted a coach. And especially when you're doing a small business, you can't afford a coach sometimes. Scott has been that coach for me. When you talk about me looking for a mentor, when you look at all the stuff that Scott has done, and there are more Scotts at SBDC, so I'm not telling everybody to inundate and call Scott, but when I was looking for a mentor, I didn't have an official mentor, but in a lot of capacities, Scott, you have served in each one of those capacities for me. And I consider you part of my team. And one of the reasons that my company has been successful was because I had you to lean on, because I had you to go and use as a resource. And I want all of the other small businesses out there to know that there is a resource out there for you, that you can go and build relationships with other small business development center consultants to get what you need. And you might have a team of small business development consultants that you work with. I have worked with others, but Scott is my go-to. He's the one that, hey, I got an issue. I'm in a system. Okay, I'm in a system, Beta Sam, and just a couple of weeks ago, I was like, okay, something's going on with my query, and it's not doing what I needed to do. Call Scott, fixed it right then. Boom, miracle worker. And I will tell you, Scott, my team was like, oh my gosh, the influx of opportunities that actually match our past performance has increased substantially because of the assistance that you gave us just a few weeks ago. So I thank you for that. That was awesome.
Yeah.
So
I think one of the things that, I also, based on my own experience as much as anything else, is it's very easy for a business owner to make some sort of an executive decision. They might have money in the bank, everybody's looking to them for direction, and they make some decision, and one bad decision can set you back years. It might be a dumb contract. It might be putting money into something that you shouldn't have, so to have a sounding board, and I'm not talking just about me, but it could be your mother, it could be another business partner, another business owner. But if you're making any significant decisions, to at least bounce it off of somebody. I think that's why quite often companies end up with a board of advisors. They don't want to make that mistake, and here's where we plan to go. And somebody might challenge that. And at least you think through the process. And I think that's another important thing that small business owners need to think about doing.
Definitely, questioning, kick the tires, poking holes in it. It doesn't mean that you might not still go in that direction, but now at least if you're going in and you thought through it with someone, you're going in the direction and you can do it in confidence. Or maybe there are things that you didn't think about. Hey, there's a ditch coming up that you weren't aware of. And by talking through it with someone, they help you point out that this is a risk that you might need to be aware of. So I definitely agree with that. So Scott, as we come to a close, couple of questions left. So of everything that you've experienced, and oh my gosh, you've had an awesome journey, what are you most proud of?
It's really funny. You don't do what I do for the money. You do it because compassion, you might say. And I can remember, it was maybe 1, 2, 3 years ago, I had a client who said, Scott, you know what's a really good feeling? And I said, what's that? And he said, when you get bills and you know you can pay them. And we had gotten his company from, which bills are we going to pay? They couldn't pay them all, but which bills are they going to pay? To the point they were actually making money. And to see, a small business that they themselves recognize that they've put in all these long hours of work, and finally they've turned the corner. And I could name a number of experiences like that with different clients. But for me, that's the reward. That's what I like to see. When they get it, they've stuck with the program, they've listened. I have a lot of clients by the same token that you try to talk, but they have a listening problem. They don't want to listen, and that's okay too. It's their business. But those that do listen and they develop a strategy and they follow that strategy, quite often they do really well. Yeah, because they've got the skills. Most business owners have the skills. Maybe not in all areas, but they do have their core competencies to do the jobs that they're trying to accomplish. And it's a matter of addressing all the stuff that tends to get in the way, all the paperwork, if you will. And certainly in government contracting, as you know, Karen, there's a lot of that,
Yes. That is phenomenal. And I understand where you're coming from when you talk about that seeing and pouring into and planting and fertilizing a small business and watching them grow and be successful. I'm an avid believer that a rising tide raises all ships. And if we can help each other, then at the end of the day, we all benefit. Our community benefits, the people who grow around benefit. So as we close, if you could give us one piece of advice, leadership advice, or just small business advice, what would that be?
I would say and this is easier said than done, but to allocate enough time. Some people would say slow down enough as a business owner to think about what you're doing and try to put together something in the way of a strategy that will help move your company forward. Many business owners get up at the crack of dawn, they work all day, they come home, they're beat, they sleep, they get up and they do it, 5, 6, 7 days a week. And they're not moving forward. In the end, it's day to day, and eventually it catches up with you. Eventually you can't do some of the things that you might have been able to do when you were younger. And I would say while you're young, I would spend a little bit of time doing that. And I would also say, I'm the type of guy that when I was in school, I would study, and I was more concerned about making sure that I understood the material than I was about getting to know some of my colleagues. And as I got older, one of the things I realized was that network is as valuable as the information itself. And that's something that I try to work with clients on is how to network, because a lot of them, they've got friends, but they don't network from a strategic point of view. And I would say learning how to do that networking can make all the difference for a business like that, because that's what's going to give them the opportunities. Even in government contracting, I see that.
Very, very much so. So, there's that saying that your net worth is associated or tied to your net worth.
Yeah.
And the other thing, kind of summarizing what you said, is that as small business owners, we need to make sure that we're working on and not in our business. Sometimes you have to because it's on you, you're just getting started, but there needs to be that time set aside to work on and not in your business. So Scott, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing
You're welcome.
rough information with our audience. How would someone reach out to the SBDC if they wanted to seek some assistance?
It's really easy. If they're in South Carolina, they can go to www.scsbdc.com. And there's a little button there that says request counseling services. And and they will assign you to somebody based on what you're after, somebody that matches up with you. Hopefully it will match up with you. And again, one of the things we've gotten better as an organization of doing is to not match you up with just one person. That one person knows that he or she has other resources within our own organization that, maybe I might be good at government contracting, but Karen might say, well, I'm thinking about getting into exporting. And then I'll say, well, then you need to see Beth Smith. I've got a colleague that does that. Or we've got people that work on the technology front. We have specialists within the organization that we can leverage to help a client. And quite often, those type of people can do more for you in a couple of meetings than you could ever do on your own in a year. So that's what I would recommend that they do.
I can attest to that. And for those of you who are not in South Carolina, I like to do the Google thing. So Google SBDC in your state, and they should be able to connect you with your local Small Business Development Center. So again, thank you, Scott, for joining us and sharing
You're welcome.
Information to our audience. Thank you for joining us again. I hope you got some valuable information. I know that I did. And I invite you to take our Synergy Leadership Assessment at our website, www.krjconsulting.com, and find that Synergy Leadership Assessment is a complimentary assessment that will help you understand how to lead yourself and to lead others. Until our next time, have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Synergy Leadership Podcast with Karen R. Jenkins. If you like what you heard today, please subscribe, rate, review, and share our show. See you next time.